Hello, Jimmy from Hairy Campers. Today we're in a very special spot today. We're in the Heritage Museum, Darwin, Northern Territory. The reason that I came here is because there's not too many examples of Second World War aircraft about bar Canberra War Memorial. They have some good examples of a Mitsubishi Zero, and they also have a good example of a P40 Kittyhawk. But no one really knows what it's like to be in action when you look at those things. So behind me, right here, is a wounded, injured or destroyed Zero from the bombing of Darwin. Now, the aircraft itself, a lot of people said about the aircraft that they were held together with rice paper and spittle. That's not very right at all. They were a very, very well built piece of machinery. If you see on the aircraft how many rivets they've got and how many stays, plus all the componentry of the operations of the ailerons. There's not much left of this aircraft, I know, but if you have a look at this aircraft, you can see that this aircraft itself was a bit like a Swiss watch. It was well made, but when you've got something that's well made and also small and finicky, it develops problems. But it did develop problems. Not a great deal of problems. You just couldn't throw it around like you could with the bulldozer, which is the Kittyhawk. The Zero could just climb and do a turn like that and come back on top of you or behind you. And as John Jackson said, do not dogfight these Zeros because they will shoot you down. So what we'll do is I'll show you a bit of the engine here. As you can see, it was a radial engine. It basically the same as just about everything else we used. It's the same sort of design, but a very, very durable aircraft. Like I said, this one was involved in the bombing of Darwin. So if we move down here, we'll walk underneath the nose of the B-52. And as we get around today, the last thing we'll look at is some of the later aircraft they've got in here. I was here working in Darwin 10 years ago when I come across this place, and it's a really, really good, if you want to come and have a look at some history aircraft, come to this place. This has got some, like I know the War Memorial's got some really good stuff, but it hasn't got a B-52. Right, if we go down here, we come down here, I want to, these were that successful that there's not very many examples of P40 Kittyhawks about. And this is probably, to give you an idea, I'm not trying to say that everyone's smashed in Australia. What I'm trying to say to you is we can see the example flying, if you're lucky enough. We can see the example in books, we can see the example in places, but we can't see what kind of damage was done to these aircraft. So this is the air cowling, which in the Kittyhawk sat directly underneath the nose. If we keep on moving back, there's a picture of a Kittyhawk here. Now some of these would have flown in the north of Australia, where we was going to go, but because of COVID, that was an impossibility. We tried and tried and tried to be able to go up to Bamigi. It's just that time, we could have went there in the end, but we couldn't plan and get it right time-wise, plus financially at the same time. So we had to scrap that, and that's why we're here today at Darwin. Now, if we have a look here, the Kittyhawk, they're 50 caliber machine guns. They're elite built. That's what they used to fire at the Japanese or whoever. This is the Browning 50 caliber. Now there were 6 of them in this aircraft, 3 on either side wing, massively armed. This aircraft was like a bulldozer. You could shoot holes in it big enough to put your head in and still come home. A massive engine, typical American design. Everything is big. The gears here, like everything was huge. This is the V12 overhead cam Allison engine. So it developed. I'm not quite sure what kind of horsepower it was. I thought it might tell me there, but they weren't big on horsepower compared to the Supermarine. This is the cockpit. Like, as you can see, it's fairly well aged, but that's the kind of view you had out of the aircraft: above you, out the side, and forward. That's the windscreen there, of course. It's probably about all I can probably show you. This is another P40 engine. This will give you a bit of an idea what they look like. So what I'm saying to you with these examples here is a lot of people could see complete aircraft and not understand or not be able to imagine the damage that they went through. So just by looking at these aircraft, you can see how badly smashed they were. So we'll move on now. I want to show you something. That was the Kittyhawk. We'll keep on moving down this way. These are the engine pods of the B-52. 2 engines sat in there, and 4 engines per wing. Massive aircraft. So we'll go around now to a Mitchell bomber that was used in the Second World War. And what I'm saying about this 75 years since the end of the Second World War is the aircraft today, how good they are today is, nearly walked into the table, or I did walk into the table. The aircraft today developed from what we learned in the Second World War. So, we'll come back down in a while and we'll probably make another take of uniforms, and there's some engines I want to show you, especially for those mechanically minded people. There's an engine over there that has some things that nobody else has ever seen before. We'll get over to the Mitchell. These are the Mitchells. They were used by the Australian RAAF and also used by the Americans. Well, they made them, so, and we used them in. We also used them in New Guinea. They were very successful. This one's got a couple of bullet holes in the screen, but a very, very reliable aircraft. I wouldn't say they're the best aircraft ever made, but we are talking 1939, 1940 aircraft. Like everything was radial engine, everything was piston engine. So I was wrong then. It's not American, it's North American. That means it's Canada. It was built in Canada. I think that's how it goes. That's why that would have been part of the Commonwealth. That's why we used them. Take you over here, and what would look like a capsule this here is a 50 caliber belly gun. or tail gun. I'm not quite sure. But if you can have a look, a man sat in that. So we'll go around the back and have a look to see what it looks like. In the back you can see where the ammunition come from. The ammunition come from above. The room that you needed was astronomical. There's what you're looking at. A man sat in there. Very, very confined space to do all your fighting in. Now if we come down here, I'll show you another aircraft that fought in the Second World War. I'm just looking for, there was a P40 Kittyhawk up at Bamigi, but Buck is saying that it's been removed, and he's not the only one. A couple others are saying the same thing. So this here, I know it looks very small, but this is the Supermarine Spitfire. Now this one's a Mark 8. When you look at them, they do look small. You couldn't really imagine how threatening they were. But this aircraft, it had a fair punch about it, because as you can see, it has a 20mm cannon on that side, a 20mm cannon on that side, and also where you see the tape, it had 303 machine guns. Now the saying, give it the whole 9 yards, that's how long a belt was. A 303 belt was 9 yards long, so that's where we got the saying from, give it the whole 9 yards. But there's where we can get close to the wing, as you can see what looks like deterioration in the wing. You are right, here's where the 303s, they come through here. But when you come to the wing, here and tap on the wing, does not sound like aluminium. That's because it's not. It's a composite type material. Some were fabric. I'm not sure if the 8s were all fabric. There was a lot of aluminium in them. But that's what made them so perfect, because you could shoot a hole through them and it just goes straight through and out the other side. Unless it hit a spar or something like that, it didn't do any real damage. As you can see, the cockpit's very small. It's a small aircraft, but a very, very powerful aircraft with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, terrifically powered. I remember Cole Pay from Scone Airport saying that you couldn't take off empty. You couldn't take off empty in this aircraft under full throttle with no load, because once the wheels left the ground, it'd prop rotate the wings. So that meant that the power of the engine and the prop would bite into the air that hard that it'd want to flip the aircraft. And the torque on you would get the aircraft sooner lifted off the ground, it would go like that. Now, the mighty F-111, you know what I feel about the F-111s. I've had a lot to do with these, with a lot of the charity work we did at Amberley, and I grew up with the F-111. It's a marvellous aircraft. I was just talking to these guys out here at the front and telling them how, people of Australia don't understand that once, if you could imagine an F-111 as a screwdriver in your toolbox. Now, once that screwdriver's worn out, it's no good to you anymore. You have to throw it away. There is no difference between these and a screwdriver. These are just another tool in the defence of Australia, and once they're worn out, and there's not a great deal you can do about it. It's with this aircraft, if I can just take a second, this from that part there, from that part forward, is the business end of the aircraft. from that part back is engine and avionics. We got these, we started talking about these in the 60s, and I think somewhere in the 70s we started to get them. But anyhow, that's the F111. We've already covered the F111 on our trip. But anyhow, we want to go down, Mr. Wilson's saying we're going to go down the left-hand side. With the upper ladder, I can see why. So if we come up the ladder, and you'll be able to get up. Everybody looks at these and says two pilots. I don't know if you'll be able to get a shot in there, but it's not two pilots. It's actually one pilot and one bombardier or navigator. But I believe the navigator could fly the aircraft if he had to. Well, I'd want him to anyhow, because if I had a medical episode or was shot or something, I'd like to be able to think that he could get us back on the ground. And as you can see, very confined, very, very confined. This one's still got a lot of the avionics in it, but it's here where it's safe. It can't be hurt in any way whatsoever. No one can take it. Nobody can dismantle it, which is good. We don't want to see these, I suppose, the want of a better word, these relics destroyed, because it's part of our history. But anyhow, move along. I want to show you some engines over here. The Sabre, I can remember these Sabres in action at Williamtown.
Oh, yeah.
About 1970, these Sabres were the frontline aircraft at Williamtown and over Australia. Now, if you go to Amberley, you'll see one of these, and it has a cut mark through to there on both sides. This is the intake for the compressor. Now, that cut mark in there is made by a power cable. Now, this aircraft, like not this one, but an aircraft that's over at Amberley that has this mark in it, it flew too low and picked up an overhead power cable, and that's what cut in through it. The aircraft landed safely, but was deemed to be airworthy again. But as you can see, still had a gun. You know, as a jet fighter, still had a gun. Carried extra fuel tanks, bombs. So yeah, I can remember this aircraft flying. And if we try and come around here, I'll show you the difference between a Sabre, which was, you know, in the 60s, like the controls and the avionics, how primitive it was. I'll move, and Mr. Wilson will get in there, but you'll have a look how primitive it was in there for a pilot. That's, you know, like the seat was made out of styrofoam. Pretty sure they sat on this. They didn't have they had ejection seats. I'm not quite sure how they work. This is before my time. Like I said, my uncle was in the Air Force at the time, and they worked on these, and then they were taken out of the operation. How I remember is about 1970 we lived at Greta, and he was at Williamtown, so we went to Williamtown to have a look. And what replaced them was this thing here, the Mirage. The Mirage was made in France, built a wing type thing. But anyhow, we used them for quite a few years until we replaced them with the Mirage with the F18. So they were there for a very long time. But anyhow, I've got one aircraft I want to show you after we do these engines. So we'll walk in through these engines here. I want to show you a couple of engines. Just wait for Mr. Wilson to catch up. I get a bit carried away sometimes and walk too fast for her. This aircraft engine here is it's 1942, made in Great Britain, and it's a reed valve engine. It has no push rods, but it is a four-stroke engine. The pistons here and the valves are up in here. So 53 litre, this was used in the Sea Fury, and a very powerful aircraft. Very, very powerful aircraft. It is, I'm just looking to see, it's 53 litres and it develops 2,500 horsepower. Huge, huge, huge engine. Now that, very powerful engine. And that's what I was saying a minute ago, for all of those mechanically minded people, when you look at these cylinders, you look at these cylinders here and you go, yeah, that's fine, I can see where the spark plug goes in the top up here, but where does the push rods go? It doesn't have any push rods. It looks like a two-stroke engine, but it's not a two-stroke engine, I believe. I think it's a four-cycle. Righto, the massive, very popular, very powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin, 12-cylinder. Now this one here was 1,648 horsepower. Very, very powerful engine. When you look at the back of it, you see some of these had a two-stage and a single-stage supercharger on the back of them. Very, very reliable, powerful engine. Now, this here is what our Boomerang was made with. This is the 14-cylinder Pratt & Whitney engine. 7 on the front, 7 on the back. Massive engine. And they use them in the Catalina. This is the engine that was in the Catalina. Also the engine that was in our Boomerang. Also the engine that was in a few other fighters, and the DC-3. So it was, you know, it was like bread. Everybody had one. I thought that I did see somewhere here was I could have been wrong. Some of the engines here are engines that we wouldn't have used, but I was trying to, I was looking for an Allison engine, but there's not one here. These things here had 2 magnetos on them. Those magnetos, with one failed, they'd kick power up to the spark plugs. 2 spark plugs per cylinder. This may be it here, I'm not sure. No, that's not it either. But anyhow, then you get into the jet era, and you know, jets have just come that further ahead now. It's not funny to what they used to be. That would have been one of the very first ones. That was the next one. This is the next type of thing. Okay, I'll take you around. Probably go back that way. I'll take you to our own homegrown and developed aircraft, which was the Boomerang. I've mentioned the Boomerang before in our videos. So there's not much of it, but there's something. We'll come back over to. We can walk in between here. This is it. The CAC, right, which is the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation boomerang. These boomerangs were made in Australia, they were designed in Australia, and they were flown by Australians. They were a very robust aircraft, down on power because of the engine, fairly primitive, but we are talking 1939. Fuel tank behind the pilot, armour plate behind the pilot here, and armour plate here. But that's the frame, like how simple was it? And this was made and designed in Australia, boomerang, that's why it was called a boomerang. But anyhow, we're going to look at one last thing, and then we're going to go. We're going to walk out the back then. I'll switch the camera off. But there's not very many people that have probably stood where nuclear weapons have been. And that's inside the belly of an F-111. I mean of a P-52 bomber.
In Australia, Darwin became home. So close had the ties between the community and the men that flew these giants become that the United
This
States
is where a nuclear weapon probably, most probably did or did not hang.
It came about after more than a decade of
So,
negotiation between the United States Air Force
huge
and
bomb
the
bay.
Aviation Historical Society of the Northern Territory. All but one B-52 was going to fly back to the United States.
We'll go back out where the audio isn't so bad.
592596, or as the refurbishment crew had dubbed her, Bossy Aussie. Members of the 43rd Bombardment volunteered to spend hundreds of hours to repaint the aircraft and have
Righto.
Her Majesty